Okay, as I told you last time, today we want to show you how to put a brick wainscot on a home. I was reading an article recently and it talked about the popularity of brick. It stated in this survey that over 80% of homeowners prefer brick over any other building material. And that's nice, but it creates a problem in that brick is more expensive than, say, aluminum or stucco. And as a result, a first-time homeowner has a hard time affording that first home if it's all brick. And so many homes have aluminum siding, and as we're going to show you, we'll put a brick wainscot on the front to give it that durability and beauty that brick provides, but we'll keep the cost down on the home. So here we have this front of this home. We're going to put this brick on this area. Now we have a black vapor barrier that we'll put down, and our brick is going to go to the windowsill height. We hit that spot, and then we're going to put in our brick sill. We'll show you how to do that. The first thing that I need to do then is I bond it out. As I've been doing, I lay that without any mortar, use my finger as a gauge to get our joints the right size. And it comes to the end, so we have that bonded out. Now I'll take my pencil and I'll go along and I'll mark where those joints are, and I can skip 2 or 3, and I'll put my marks again, and I'll do that down the entire wall. Okay, now we'll take those brick out. We have that bond marked so we know where we're going to lay our brick. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to have our straight edge so we can hook our line onto the straight edge and lay to the line. So the first thing I do is I find a straight piece of wood. Here I've used a piece of particle board. It's straight on one edge. I put it even with my foundation. My brick ledge is 4 inches. My brick is 3. The brick that we're laying on this particular house is 3 inches wide. So I lay that on the 4-inch ledge, and it gives me the finger room behind the brick. Now I put that straight edge straight up that, and then I plumb that and tack that in place. Okay, now before we do anything, we need to determine the height we need to hit. I figured out that in order to have a good windowsill, we have to hit our mark at 2 feet 6.5 inches. And so we need to determine how we hit that mark. Well, if I look at one of our brick with our tape measure, we can get a close-up of that. You can see that a 9 or an 0 works pretty well for this size brick. So that'll give us the brick plus a nice sized joint. So if I look at my corresponding tape and I find 2 feet 6.5 inches, I find that my 0 or my 0 is right there. So I've got to get up just a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to mark this on 0s, and I'm going to add a 1/16 of an inch on about 6 courses, and that will make up my 1/2 inch. So we'll put that right on the top of our foundation. And I'm going to mark that. There's my 0. I'm going to raise it up a 1/16 of an inch. So in a foot, I've gained a 1/4 of an inch. I keep going. Now I'm going to raise my tape up. And I've got now 10 courses of equal distance. By using my tape, the 0 or the 0, and I've gained a little bit in order to make up that 1/2 inch. Now I'll be able to hit my desired height of 2 feet 6.5 inches. I hit that point, then I can put my sill on. We work out perfect with a window. Now on the other end, we have a concrete porch. It's very difficult to nail a piece of wood up to concrete and then hook our line in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down on that end, I'm going to build a lead, and then we'll hook our line into that, and then we can start laying the wall to our line. So I'll go down on that end now, and I'll build our lead. Okay, now we have our bond marks, so now we can then take our brick off and begin building our lead. Now I want you to notice the brick that we're using is 9 inches long and 3 inches wide. So as we lay that, we're going to be on third bond. You can see that when we lay that, we're going to be on third bond. Okay, now with our modular brick, we were on half bond. And you can see the difference when we have a modular size brick, and these are an advantage or a queen size brick. So this was half bond. Now we're going to be laying on third bond. So now we'll got my mortar, we'll begin by building our lead. I'll take my mortar and I'll spread it along my foundation. Now I've got a straight edge up the side and I've marked it so that I have my coursing marked out like I did on the other end. Now I can build my lead. So I'll start out with an end. That's how it bonded out. So I use that end I broke off and I put that against the foundation, tap that into place, and I tap it down to my mark that I've got on the concrete. Now I can lay my next brick. And I'm doing this backwards. It might look a little awkward, but so the camera can see I'm not turning around and laying it the way I normally would. And notice that I'm staying on my bond marks that I've got on the foundation. And I'll tap that into place. That's normally about the size of lead that we build, about 3 to 4 brick long. Now take my level, I set it on the brick and I tap on the level. Always when you're laying brick, building a lead, you tap on the level and not on the brick. And that straightens them out. So I get that level. And then I'll plumb it on the side. And then I'll use my level as a straight edge to make sure they line up. There's my first course of my lead. Now you'll notice here we have a dryer vent that needs to be placed in. We can slide that into place. And now we're ready to continue our lead. Spread my course. Push that out to the front of the brick a little bit. Now I'll start on my third bond. I need to break another end to put in there. I can do that with my trowel, hold that up and pop that in the hole. I'm going to break that right through the hole in the brick. I can trim that off if it's a little too long with the edge of my trowel. Now I can lay that on my lead. Now I can lay one more brick. take my level, and again I level it along the top, tapping my level to tap the brick down. Now I plumb the side. Then I use a straight edge to straighten it. Now I'm ready for my next course. I'll spread that. And I need to put a little mud down this side to fill in around that dryer vent. Now I have a problem here that the dryer vent sticks up just a little bit too high and I can't get my brick down. So I need to trim out part of that. If I have a brick saw, that would be the best way to do it. I don't have a brick saw here, so I can take my hammer or my trowel and do that, and I'll show you how you can do that. Now, sometimes you can do this with your trowel. You have to be very careful, but if you hit that with your edge of your trowel, you can slice that brick off. Okay, now we can lay that into place and we can get over that dryer vent. And then we can lay our end piece in here. Now one more brick on this end. And I'll just continue to run this lead up until I have it up to the height up here, and then I can hook my line in and continue then to lay the brick wall to our line. First I level it, then I plumb it. I get it plumb, make sure it's straight. So I'm leveling the lead, and then I plumb my lead. And then as I hook my line on, then my wall is going to be straight. Okay, now our lead's complete. Now I hook my line in, and then I'll take the metal trig, hook that on the line, and set that on our first course. And I'll put a brick on that to hold that in place. Now we're ready to lay our wall to the line. And each time we raise the line, we'll use our trig, put it up, raise it to the proper line. So to begin with, we're on the first course. Now we're ready to lay that wall. You can see I'm right on my bond marks, the marks that I've placed on the foundation. So as I lay out my wall on that first course, it's very important that I stay on my bond marks. And then when I get to the end of my wall, it will bond out properly. And the last brick goes in and it fits. Again, tap it down to the line, but don't touch the line. Now I'm ready to raise my line, and you notice I pulled my line block around so that I can see my marks. So I can raise that and put that line right on my mark. Now I raise my trig at the other end, and I'm ready to continue my wall. Okay, and I also want to mention on our joints, these are going to be raked, and so we can normally let those go until the wall is completely done. If we were going to round tool these, we would need to check it. Now that joint is just right to be tooled. This one's too wet, but that's just right. So if we were going to tool these joints, we'd let it go 3 or 4 courses. Then we'd go back along and tool those. But like I said, we're going to rake these, recess the joints. We can wait till we get all the way up, then we can rake out the joints. So we'll let that go. Now our ties, again, they're metal 22 gauge ties. They have holes in them for our nails. We're going to put those where the studs are. We have a stud right there. We'll bend that. And it's a good idea to put it down in the hole as well. That just gives it a better tie. So I bent that, stick that down in the hole. Then I take my nail, drive that in, and then every 16 inches where our studs are, we're anchored to that stud wall. That way the brick will not fall off. You know, the brick is sturdy, but it still needs to be tied back to that stud wall in case of an earthquake. And requirements for ties will vary depending on the part of the country you're in. Okay, now I want to talk to you a little bit about brick. Here we have a brick that's smaller, but notice that it doesn't have any holes. Most brick are manufactured with holes. And here's another brick that has small holes. Depends on the type of machine that they're made with. They have holes or a recess in them for mainly 2 reasons. One, they can make a brick cheaper. They're using less material if they make holes in it. But more importantly than that is the holes are there so that the mortar pushes into those holes or into this area and bonds the brick together. So rather than just have mortar in between the brick with the holes, we have mortar that pushes up into the brick, bonds the brick better. And that brings up something that's, I think, kind of interesting that you might have wondered about. Sometimes we have people say you're not supposed to furrow the mortar. And let me show you, we've talked about that before. As I spread my mortar, we want that mortar to be out to the face of the brick, so we kind of furrow it. You push it out to the front so that when we go to tool it, we don't have voids. We talked about that earlier. So we furrow that mortar out to the front. Now, architects and engineers, they don't like to see that furrowing take place, because what happens, let me show you, if most bricklayers, or a lot of bricklayers, they furrow it, they'll furrow that just like that to push that mortar out to the front. Well, then it leaves what is a void in the center of that. So as we lay our brick, it doesn't push up into the hole because there's a void in there. And architects hate to see that. They want that, so as I can show you here, without furrowing that, when we push that brick down, the mud pushes up in the holes and it bonds really good to the brick below and the brick above. That's what the holes are for. That's why architects and engineers don't like that furrowing to take place. So what I've found out's a good thing to do is when you spread that mortar, take it just a little bit and push it out. Don't furrow a big deep furrow like that. It gets the mud out to the front of the brick, but it leaves a void in the center of that, and then you don't get that mortar pushing up in. So take the tip of your trowel, push it out just a little bit so you still have the brick out, or the mortar out to the front of the brick, but you don't have that void so that you have mortar that fills those joints. Okay, now we've got our wall to the height we need it. Now we're ready to put our sill in. Now most of the homes in this area have the wainscot with a sill straight across the top. We've decided to do this a little differently, so we've added one more course, and then we'll put a sill here, we'll put a sill under the window, and then we'll raise up again another course and put our sill over there, just to give it a little different appearance than most of the homes here. So now I'll lay the sill underneath the window. First thing I need to do is cut some brick. If I've got a saw, that's fine, but I can cut these with a hammer quite easily. Now what I need is a 5 1/4 inch cut. So I'll bring my brick set and my hammer. Let me mark on the brick 5 1/4. Now I can take my brick set, put it on that mark, and hit it with the hammer. Breaks it right at my mark. Now, the slope of the sill requires that this back edge be a little shorter. As I cut those brick, that worked perfect. Now I can align that, make them all the same length. Again, made it so that I can lay those in. As that sill sits, then that lower portion is shorter and it fits in nice. So now I'll set one brick, just like when I build my leads or set my poles, I build one brick at the end. So I'm going to set my lead right here. Now, as I set that first brick, this hole is going to show. So I want to fill that in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill that in with mortar. I'm going to turn it over, lay it down on a clean surface, and I'm going to push mud down into those holes. I tap on it to get it settled, and I'll turn it over, and we have a pretty clean surface. The holes are filled. I can take a little bit of mud, fill those in. See, I don't have this plastered side. I did it so that I use the side that's fairly clean. And now I'll lay that in. And I only want to butter just a little bit of that. I'm not going to butter the whole side because it's going to stick out past the face of that brick. I stick it under the windowsill, and then I tap the edge down to give it the slope that I want. So I'm sliding it under the windowsill, and then I'm putting it down for the slope. Okay, now I'll put that trig on my line, set that on my sill brick, and then I'll take a piece of brick, set it on it to hold it in place. Now I can lay this sill. I've got a trig on this end, one down on the other end. I'm ready to lay that sill. Now again, I need to take my tape measure, measure my opening. Now as you can look at that, you can see that my opening is exactly 4 feet, which works out to an aught. You can see that aught corresponds to the 4 feet. That works very well for these brick. Again, if I look at that brick and look at the aught, it gives me a nice sized joint. So that's what I'm going to lay these brick on. So I'll mark across this window on an aught. Let's see if you can see with that brick in there. We'll mark right across the window with an aught. And that tells me where I need to lay my brick to. So I have my proper spacing when I come to the end of the windowsill. Okay, now it's important that when you set both of these, this one and the one on the other end, that you look at it and side it and make sure you have the same slope. Now we can spread our mortar and we can lay our sill in. We'll butter the brick that's there, and then we'll butter this brick. Again, we're laying it in as a sill brick, so we've got to butter it that way. Push that in and tap it down to the line. And clean your mortar off. And I've marked my window so I know where to lay that to. Okay, now I can also take my hammer, and if I hit that just right, I can get it to break. And then I butter all the way around that. I butter the brick that's there. I set that down in place. tap it down to the line. Now I want to keep the end of the brick up here up tight against the window. And again, I'll butter that brick. Make me another sill. And butter that. If you can see my mark on the window there, I've laid that brick right up to the mark. So when I get to the other end of the window, it'll bond out perfectly. And I'll just continue to do this, fill this sill in. Okay, now I've stayed on my marks, and so this last two brick should fit in here just nicely, and we get this sill finished, then we'll go down to the next window. We won't have to move the line or anything. We've got it set up. We can go lay the next window, and then we can come back and put on this higher sill. So I'll butter both sides of that. This is my closure. So I'm going to butter both sides and slide that in place. Put it down to the line. Now these joints, they're not quite ready to be raked yet. We can still hold off raking the joints. These top of the sills, we'll round joint those, and so when we get, after we get the other sill on, then we'll do that. Okay, now we've got a lower sill done under both windows. Now we're going to lay the upper sill. Now notice we laid the brick sill underneath the lip of the window. Up here we don't have anything to lay it under, so I put a guide along. Just a 1x2, I've just tacked that up. Now I can use that as a guide to lay my sill brick to. I'll butter the end, I'll butter this brick, and then I'll slide that in place. Tap it down to the line. Doing it the same way, only this time I'm using that 1x2 as a guide rather than the window. I butter both ends of the brick, tip it underneath my piece of wood, tap it down to the line. Okay, as you can see, now we've finished the entire wainscot on the front of this home. All I have to do is now finish raking the joints, brush the wall, and then we'll come back in a couple weeks and we'll wash it with a cleaning solution. Now on the top of the sill, rather than rake it, we tool that with a round joiner. Give that a nice finish. When they come and put the aluminum on to finish off the front of this, they'll come down, cover this little joint that's in there, and we have a real nice finished appearance on the front of this home. A brick wainscot. For a few $100s, you can really add a nice appearance to the front of a home.